present to everybody. There you go. Well, go
All right.
ahead. Good
This is
evening,
probably good.
everybody.
welcome to a sneak peek. I don't know. I mean, I was gonna probably record this pretty soon, but it takes a lot of time to record stuff, so I figured I'd show you what I was working on. I've got this all pretty halfway done right now. Um, but it's all about how Lucifer is light, and so light comes from the breath of God that moved upon the waters. And really, in the beginning, there was only God, and therefore God is darkness. I mean, it's not necessarily that God is the color dark, but like the darkness that it comes from, and also that it commands all the sounds. And so that came up in a number of ways this week. One of the main ones is that I'm surrounded by mosquitoes, and I don't really like have a huge problem with mosquitoes. They don't really bite me that much, but a lot of people I know do. And their blood, they might have the promoter sequences. I think there's like 3 or 4 that actually make one taste better to mosquitoes and lure them over to them, especially people who come from families who've ever had malaria, which is a whole other thing. But I didn't really want to kill the mosquitoes. I mean, I've been just seeing all these window covered bugs. I always hitting like bugs on the highway. I was like, there's got to be a
Yeah,
better way.
but
So,
that just happens at about 50 kilometers an hour, and they just start dying on your windscreen.
oh yeah, and if you go 3 times that, you get 3 times as many bugs. Anyway, so karma. So I found this thing that works called the mosquito ringtone, and I actually been using like different recordings of frequencies that do the same thing, but these sonic frequencies strike terror into the hearts of insects, and I like that. It's my jam right there. Something that it like uses the sounds that are so unusual. Well, it turns out that when you listen to it, you're like, okay, it sounds a lot like bats. And thinking about it, that makes a lot of sense. So it's actually emulating the form of the master of serpents, but also what is that at the end of the day? Because a fruit bat likes fruit, and a vampire bat, is it really a vampire? Like, I like bats. I mean, bats seem friendly and they eat bugs. And I've always liked bats, even as a kid. And in the eternal words of Peter Tosh, and I'm not quite paraphrasing, vampires ain't bats, tis mosquitoes, said, like in the
Vampire
documentary.
bits, man.
Vampires. Like, so
Vampires.
it's interesting that the Scottish accent's the Jamaican accent, but that's for another day. So Stepping Razor Red X, an important documentary, has this quote: "Vampires don't come out and bite your neck anymore. Instead, they cause something destructive to happen. Blood will spill, and those invisible vampires will get their meals. Well, I don't fight against vampires. Vampires fight against I. I only protect myself from vampires." And, because I know they exist, and specifically visibly, we do not have to say who all the vampires know themselves and seen, or all they know that they are seen, and all the righteous ones know themselves being seen. So my thought is fruit bats eat fruit and vampire bats eat vampires. And I know that vampire bats, like right now, they like kill cattle sometimes, like because they don't have the natural predators that they used to have in the lands that used to be covered in guinea pigs and these other animals. What were they? Well, I'll get back to that in a second. Actually, like in the old world, there were bigger things. There were giant mosquitoes. Actually, there even are to this day some rather large bats, and some larger insects, like some mosquitoes that are bigger than your hands, that are pretty scary. But what do vampire bats do? They produce this saliva, and the protein inside the saliva is a protein called draculin that causes the blood to stop from clotting. So it's really useful, actually, in fighting against malaria. It's like the weirdest thing. Like vampire bats bite saliva will help you avoid getting malaria. So, I mean, if you get bit by a mosquito, get the spit from a vampire bat. And yeah, they now make this new chemical from it called draculin, which is, from the glycoprotein of the amino acids. It's composed of 411 of them. And together it makes this anticoagulant that they've been using in all kinds of therapies for people with lymphoma, with strokes, with, people getting heart surgeries or brain surgeries. It's effective for up to 9 hours and helps, better than any blood thinner than we've ever invented. I mean, this is just crazy science stuff. So, in a world filled with bugs, and I'm seeing bigger and bigger bugs all the time, Also, you have to think about how weird it is to use hematophagy, which is like the eating of blood as your main way of survival, sustenance. There's not a lot of species that do that for obvious reasons. It takes a lot, and but these mosquitoes do it. So all of a sudden you've got this like a case for actual vampires that vampire bats consume, and therefore vampire bats are the enemy of the enemy. So they're pretty much my comrade, right? And I don't like mosquitoes, right? And just in general, I don't like the idea of malaria, because malaria, even though I don't get too many bites from mosquitoes, luckily, I'm still scared of malaria. Like, malaria has killed possibly half of all humans who ever lived. Like, even talking about plagues, apocalypses, wars, more, people died from malaria than just about anything that's ever happened. And, like, that's why this like sound, the sonic sound, came up in my mind, as like it's an interesting echoing of both the darkness, the light, the voice that moves upon the water that creates the light, and its effect of playing another instrument. It basically plays a completely different animal, like a beast, as its own, So I like that. Plus, there are certain ones I think you can do that even work. Yeah, that work against rats. So that's
You know your
worse.
new favorite drink now, right?
No, what is it?
Gin and tonic.
Tonic is ruined. I should have put that in there. All right, I'll put that in the real video, because tonic now is just lots of chemicals and syrups and everything else like that.
Yes.
But true tonic, right? What's the stuff in tonic? It's quinine.
Quinine.
Quinine, yeah, quinine. So quinine is amazing. I mean, that's probably worth looking into. Let me see if I can find some quinine. I'd rather use Beast. Quinine is a medication used to treat malaria and babesiosis. Babesiosis. Have you seen this? I don't know what this is.
No, never heard of it. It appeared out of nowhere. It was the babesiosis.
It looks like it came out of the Lyme's disease or something, right? It's a Lyme's disease trick. Oh gosh, Lyme. All right, so ticks bother me. I don't like ticks, really.
I don't like politics.
Yeah, right.
That's like several nasty ticks,
Yeah. Well, I think it's starting to sound like a lot of these things are related in a sense. Like, we forget how many species have communities in our bodies and are in contact with their other communities and other bodies. So you could almost think about diseases as refugee populations or immigrant populations in the political body or the human body, like being similar. Like there's a certain amount of consciousness that exists that's not the tick itself or the mouse itself or the human itself. It's any number of these other things that we're looking at. Like, sorry, I didn't close that, but the kinites, the zygotes, sporozytes, gametocytes, like these kinds of things, erythrocytes, like they all live on multiple layers of the ecosystem. You can almost imagine them in like they're like the whole world is like a city to them, and then they have apartments, houses, summer homes, cars, jobs, and they're in different parts of different people in different places on different things. Well, I just want to get that one out because I thought that was kind of interesting. The other thing I'm working on is Tron, because talking about God is darkness, it seems like it's pretty important to talk about Tron. And if you don't know me by now, like my fundamental religious talks are going to be a little,
If you don't know me by now, you will never know me.
This is if you don't, this is my principal condition. You know what I mean? But like, okay, so God is darkness, creating creation, the creator creating the creation. In the beginning, Elohim created by forming from nothing the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and void of emptiness, and void of emptiness, and darkness was upon the face of the deep primeval seas. The Spirit of God was moving over the face of the waters, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw the light was good, pleasing, useful, and he affirmed and sustained it. And God separated the light, distinguishing it from the darkness, right? So he brings forth this thing that is caused, by him saying it straight up, So God says this thing, and the sounds in the darkness move across the waters, and in that, like that vibration, it actually creates, this electric phenomenon of loose. What's it called? Piezo loose, or it's basically electricity and friction that cause the creation of light from sound. So light is Lucifer, God is darkness, and that's the primordial egg kind of story. That goes. It's pretty big in the Abraxas, and so that's something I'll have to talk about more, and I'll bring up is like how gnosis and Egyptian gnosis connect, like the idea of energy, matter, like how E equals MC squared really comes from Egyptian math and like ancient Kabbalistic alchemical traditions, which talk about the 7 chakras as layers of rays of light within the spectrum that is the being that you're calling the person. And the best example for that is the perfect being, which is the Christ, because it's like, the way it ought to be, and probably is, but and so Tron the Baptist, that's been the way I've been saying it for years. I feel like I'm the first person, I don't know of anyone else who got that metaphor yet, but like the digital Goetia and the son of the maker, because they live in a world without the sun. Otherwise, you could call it Metropolis with frisbees, and I'm sure somebody somewhere said that ever, like Roger Ebert. But yeah, I mean, isn't it obviously like about Metropolis? They're the same kind. It's a black and white movie that's hand colored. It had, it's released in the 80s around the same time as Yogi Moroder's version, and then in fact I think the same year as Yogi Moroder's version, so the soundtrack, and also is correlated with a sequel that came out the year that the film was finally finished. But you have this idea of dusting off the old touchscreen and looking at the high-tech ancient technology and seeing what it really is like, on a fundamental level, like the gnosis principle of fundamentality is the most advanced forms are the most ancient. So, and there's a lot of shows recently that kind of like about that, like *Halt and Catch Fire* recently came out, which is like, you think that the Age of Spies ended with the Age of the Fall. No, I mean, like the beginning of corporate spies is the beginning, or it's like the next incarnation of double agents. When you have people that have non-disclosure agreements, I mean, it's the spy culture, the corporate spy culture is far more interesting than the 60s spy culture. But and they have pretty even like to the level of within itself mutiny against themselves and becoming obsessed with their own agendas. And also the important film, the C-23 or 3 and 20, not the Jim Carrey one. Please don't even bother with that. But Nicht ist so wie es scheint, I think it's called. You want to say it? It's German.
Oh, thanks for assuming my German is nichts ist so wie es scheint. Nothing is what it seems.
Ain't that always the way it is? So this movie is about a German youth who's obsessed with Robert Anton Wilson, which is like, how many of those do we know? Oh man, we should probably mute that for a second. Can I unmute her? Uh-oh, did I just make it so she can't be unmuted? That's terrible. I didn't mean to do that. Well,
I don't know.
My bad. She'll be back soon, I'm sure. So, okay, so this is a true story about this German kid who was a hacker and how he was disappeared after working for the government or another, either the East German government or the KGB or some company or the CIA or some middle between. Like, he got his hands on some of the most powerful mainframes at the time, installed like some sort of a BSD Unix code on them that really put them in overdrive. And all of a sudden he was like being tapped all the time by different government agencies, so, like, because that was the beginning of the hacking infrastructure where, the Five Eyes, the British government, the American government, were all working together to try to find people like this. And the German government, the West German government, was certainly complacent with working with somebody that might have been working with the KGB. So he was disappeared, and that was pretty sad. But before all that, there was Tron, like pretty much the first thing. And like, even if, no matter what you believe in, I think they kind of got past being like argued about, because it was, about electrons, and we're pretty sure electrons exist. We talk about electricity. So, but like the story goes that deep in the 1980s, there was a giant touch tablet that already existed. It's like an iPhone before they got smaller. It's like the first of them, the grandpa iPhone, and it became self-aware. And through the self-realization of abracadabra, and like the one who knows this is the maker, Flynn. And there are a bunch of people that work together to write parts of this program. So that's why it decides that it's not just made by one, which is another interesting thing about, like, if you think about the Thothian way of Disney, that they would make that another, and little things that they put in it to be a little irreverent, such as they call the maker the user, right? Like a user account. So the user is, talking to the programs, and one of many not to be revered. But the program enslaves the users, and especially the one that it rises from the top through and captures the maker, which is a trip, actually. Like the way it scans him down is from the limbs, and then his whole spine is the first, and then it goes eventually through the sacral. But yeah, into the Ark of the Covenant, right, into the mainframe, into the server, into the monolithic cube, through the laser eye, and into the fiber optic digital reality where he's deresoluted, and that's what the MCP is planning on doing, to deresolute anyone who stands in his way. Which is like, I mean, if you didn't see the crucifix metaphor of Tron, like, it's there clearly, and the maker foresees this. Like, that, it's all the thing about this movie. I've found certain people find it boring, and they tend to be atheists with not a lot of background in symbology. Even the ones who are atheists, you were just like, like, they just don't want to think about this kind of level of pathos, perhaps, but it tends to be something that's more interesting to people that have a religious background, even an evil background, right? And I think you kind of almost have to have a satanic or Christian or pagan or Masonic or some sort of just to find these inside jokes at all funny, because like there must be really, really humorous inside jokes to the people who write this stuff. But I think for most people, they just aren't that interesting, But here you got this idea that Flynn has created Clue in his own image, and he says it very verbatim. He's the maker, and the dude, Jeff Bridges, plays the maker. And Clue is a codified likeness utility. So in a sense, he's just following in the idea that he is like Lucifer. He's the image made in the likeness. But his difference between him and a normal human is he has no choice, right? He's just forced to do as he's designed to do. So he's basically a Goetia. He's like a demon. He's like, and that's what the Linux term for it is a daemon, with the the DAE, or the key, like the middle symbol for that, for daemonology. It has a lot to do with programs. Like, even the language, Apple's operating system is written on BSD, which is their symbol is a red demon. I should find that, put that up, I guess. But hacking into the grid, abracadabra, greetings programs. Eventually, Flynn gets into the realm. He sees like a sinister realm. He can't really like escape. Where false atheist technology, or the technologarchy. There you go. Technologarchy. False atheist technologarchy runs the the planet, and they say anyone who believes in the user is destroyed. It's like, but you're talking to one. All right, now you're dead. And interesting also to look at the map. You'll see Pac-Man is on his map. So Pac-Man is actually a guard for the system, and the ghosts are guards for the system. So it's like the whole thing is demons that are running this realm, this labyrinth. They're keeping them safe, and the superhuman being this kind of upwards thing instead of being this downwards thing. So looking at Tron as this sort of creation that's to replace humanity, not the other way around. And that's also another sign of its like lack of fundamentality. It doesn't believe in the gnosis principle that the fundamental is the highest form or the best form. Instead it tries to produce that there's a Athenian Hellenistic light comes second, and then third will be Isis, and there's the age of Aquarius. So that things are getting better all the time, which you be the judge for yourself if that's really what's happening. But master control program. Oh, Phil's got a video up. Check that out. Master Control Program, which is basically Moses. According to South Park, it is anyway. You know, they've made the point that the Master Control Program is Moses, and he's the maker of the user's accounts. So he kind of fundamentally is a chess program that was the first to connect with the outside world of leaders, you know, of users, makers, and in it so much irreverence is put into things like, do all users have a plan, and like all users must have a plan, right? But no, users are revealed to be like other programs, and they just make it all up as they go along. And that's actually pointed out in the second film, that it's a strength that they improvise, not a weakness that they don't have plans. But Tron baptizes the maker in the energy pools in the middle of the film, which I find to be like the most interesting. Like, why is this not more talked about? I just don't get why this isn't obvious to people. Tron it just rhymes. Maybe I'm missing more too, because there's the tape access recorder, tar files, and ion, Elohim, and you know, I'm sure that there's more you could say, like the tar god, but we'll get into that. But like Tron the Baptist, I'm just so pushed on by that theory, and I just think that there's like some more information there that they do like put around there to make it obvious. Like Tron's like Gabriel or an archangel, like that too, because he's trying to protect the maker. But the believers and the users are being hunted down, so they have to go to the Tar Guard, right? And that's literally the name of the file. It's not even an allegory. I mean, it is, but in Linux or in Unix or in mainframe systems, you have tape access records, right? So you have like the tar files. They're called .tar. If you're installing anything on Linux, you have to use .tar. Let me see if I can find, you know, tar cvf techmint 1419.12 tar. This is like a file I found just so I could get an example of what it would look like to access a tape record. And the way tape records work is you have a tape that is just solid, and it's a recording of sound, and on it are digital records, and they're played back, you know? So you've got data that's recorded for later, and you can change that with modems. And that's where modems come in, because they can replace the tape record with live speech protocol, or with the Grossel algorithm can actually do data. But Dumont, which is a name also of a very important company, get into that, like the oil and rubber trees and their existence in the ancient rubber mills, cutting down the rainforest.
That's DuPont.
No, DuPont too, but Dumont is a company. Dumont,
Right.
What does Dumont do then? Is that not right? Am I missing something? I don't think did DuPont do rubber trees? Dumont was a television network. Okay. One of the world's pioneer commercial television networks, rivaling NBC and CBS. It was owned by Dumont Laboratories. Dumont Laboratories was an American equipment manufacturer in 1931 in New Jersey, founded by Alan Dumont. Alan Dumont was an inventor of cathode ray tubes for use in televisions. Okay, yeah, so that's even better. So he's a guy who invents the tubes, you know, the series of tubes. This is Al Gore. I'm just kidding. But so this guy invented the real series of tubes, though, that had the bugs in them, not mosquitoes. But now I've got enough puns for the next real live recording. So you detect the Sphinx Oracle. Oh, loud. Oh, hey, what's up?
Can't hear you just yet.
Why am I screen shared? What?
How's it going?
I didn't share my screen. Get me out of there. What's happening? Okay, there you go.
My bad. I was trying to
that's right.
see the page for a second, but I've got my screen shaved or shared, so it was showing yours. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Hi. I just missed everything.
Oh man, you're gonna like this stuff. I got some stuff on Tron the Baptist, and
cool.
Been doing a little bit of that. I'm halfway through it. I'll just say the last little bit I was at, which is like they meet the Tar Guard, and the Tar Guard is the way that you can connect with the outside world, and it's based on Dumont. And Dumont, we were just realizing, was the inventor of the cathode ray tube and had his own television station that was shut down. CBS and NBC and Dumont were like contemporaries, and Dumont was shut down. But Dumont is the tar guard Tartarian. They even say it in the show that they have to go to the tar guard. But tar is important to Linux and Unix and mainframes because you use a tape access record to play back data that's recorded in sound magnetically. This would be what it would look like in a computer system. You'd be like home/tar CVF techmint run tar sequence, and it would like play the tar at a certain speed off the tape. And then eventually there were modems, and you could record information live and communicate with the system directly, and that would be like an internetwork of live systems. So that's like why the Technosphinx oracle in Tron is called the Tar Guard. And eventually he's martyred for the users by his choice to refuse to submit to the MCP, and he's deresoluted in order that they can keep all systems out. And even the character Ram, which is a name you could compare to like the Go to the RAM, but also to the random access memory, he becomes disintegrated, deresoluted into the kind of Gnostic, druidic idea of everyone becomes part of the mainframe again. But all of them are sort of martyrs, and it makes it possible for Tron the Baptist to connect to the outside and actually get to the word the maker. And the maker is not the MCP, which we were mentioning, there's like the master control program, and he's basically Moses, because in South Park compares him to Moses because he was the first to actually get access to the outside world and is made most in the image of the user, which, is another little Disney dystopian pun because they call the maker the user, but it's also correct in terms of how the Linux systems work, that programs are talked to through and by users, but also coders, right? So coder should be the correct term. Hacker could be another term, but coder has something to do with being a tapestry weaver, and that that's like what the wife in the Iliad is doing, is she's coding. So there's a whole thing that's Tron's all about the digital Goetia. It's all about summoning spirits, which are the daemons, and daemons are the Linux name for programs, right? So you would say, like, if you're using Apple or you're using Windows, the kernel, like the kernel, if it's the BSD Unix kernel, it's using a series of daemons to run a system. And that's literally the techno jargon that they use. They call them daemons, all the programs, the sub-programs. But what's interesting about Tron 2 is that it jumps from the story of the maker to the son of the maker. And instead of it being about the sacrifice of the son, it's the sacrifice of the father, because it's bringing forth the age of Aquarius. And in the age of Aquarius, there's this goddess, So let me see if I can get to that part. I've just started going through this a bit, so. But Flynn has become the most powerful maker, the son of the maker, saved by Tron the Baptist. Oh, I'll go back just for it. Okay, I like Metropolis. This is why this matters. In 2010, because in 1982 is when Metropolis Yogi Marauder version came out. It was also the year that Tron came out. Metropolis 2010 was also the year that Metropolis, the full film, all the deleted scenes and hidden scenes were found, right? Well, that's also the year that they produced Tron Legacy. And Tron Legacy is like Metropolis with Frisbees. And I don't think Roger Ebert actually said that, but it sounds like something he would. So I'm going to use that. Plus, Daft Punk, and Daft Punk was pretty cool. And they did the whole soundtrack. And I don't mean just like DJ'd it. They were also writing like a symphony score, which was, like pretty great. But Flynn becomes the most powerful maker. The son of the maker, who has no contact with him, comes into the realm, which, by the way, is a dark realm. The disc has the light. Notice that. But the realm is completely in darkness, the whole movie. And they've got neons to kind of like, electronic neon lights, more than there's even LEDs. And 2010 also is like the year of the second 2001: A Space Odyssey, the final Odyssey. But in this, both films, they talk about the importance of like resurrection and the Phoenix and creating a new thing. And it's also very much about ISIS. So you've got this character called the ISO, which is like a disk image, image scanned object or something like that. I need to make that go away. Very annoying message. Okay. And so she's ISO, Quora. A Quora is also the instrument that the guitar is based on, the African instrument. And you have to think, it's the maker's favorite program, right? So what's the devil's favorite thing is music, and what's the devil's favorite instrument? Probably the guitar, right? And but really maybe the Quora. because it's the first, maybe it's like kind of similar. It really comes down to that fundamentality. And also interesting is what they're eating at their table is a pig. And of all, this is the only meal they eat in the whole movie, is they eat a pig, So that replaces the first movie where they baptize, But all the while, Clue, which was made in the image of Flynn, the maker, is planning an invasion to our realm, because he thinks that's the best way of taking the resources that this is what he was programmed to do. Sympathy for the devil for a second. Like this, you put yourself in the shoes of Lucifer. He's created in the image of God, but he's not God. And he's told to do what he's told to do, which is to make the perfect system. And every day he does that. And then God says, actually, I don't really want the perfect system. I want to network with other systems and, have this organic experience and allow this, these images to just sort of self-generate and digital jazz. And yeah, that's not what, that's how God has changed by reflection of looking at what perfect system has been created. So that's an interesting aspect to this movie. I never really went into it expecting, you watch a Disney movie, it's going to be evil, but it's funny, like how passionate they can be about the devil. So then, the Tron 316 moment goes down, except it's backwards, because in this version, the maker sacrifices himself to bring forth the ISO into the world and brings this goddess into the world by destroying himself and Clue, the image, because he has to destroy his own disc, which destroys his identity, and he dies. But also at the same time, it destroys Clue. So there's this dualism trip that's destroying each other. And in the end, you've got the son who's not perfect, but he's basically perfect. And the father sacrifices himself for the daughter, or whatever he would call his favorite. And she's, again, Isis, the ISO. And he believes it's important because she's going to fabricate DNA technology that'll heal humanity and it'll transform the world of humanity, I think is literally the words that they use. And so it ends with, right before they leave this matrix, they're talking about what's it like out there, because they might not make it. And they're thinking, well, it's warm because of the sun. And they talk, oh yeah, there's no sun here. It's the first time you kind of think about that in the movie. The whole movie, you've been in darkness and everything's been very moody, and they're self-illuminated beings. But outside, there's light. So they live in this disc, is what they say. And it's kind of like the realm of Saturn, right? They're in the disc. And they end it with being like, let's tie together what's our commonality. Well, we all love the sun. It's warm, and without it, we would not have anything. Which is this whole maker trip, right? That there's the maker and the sun and the light. And it's all tied together, and the maker being the devil. And are you living in the devil's realm? And is it good? But she decides she wants to see the sun, and he says, I want to show you the sun. And I think it's like, the point of it is that God is darkness. So that's kind of that's my trip.
Wow. Holy. That's deep.
There's another half of that I already did. So when this is done, you can hear that. Probably won't put this
Yeah,
up
well, no,
because I want to record
I was actually
better.
just talking about that to a friend that was here, because you had mentioned you were going to talk about what you just did. And I said it'll be interesting to hear Andreas's take on God as darkness. So I heard part of it.
Yeah, I don't know if I covered enough. If there's more things I need to say. Like the beginning of it, like I said, I talked about how God moves upon the waters. Where's that? And I use the amplified version of the Bible, which I kind of like. It's basically the King James, but it's written by some Bible college scholars. So they have like brackets usually around places or parentheses, and they'll be like, this is, and then cited, this is the word we use, and here are some other translations for it. But it's not too dense so you can get through it. But it's like, in the beginning, Elohim created by forming from nothing the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and void of a void of emptiness, and darkness was upon the face of the deep primeval seas. The Spirit of God was moving over the face of the waters, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So in a sense,
It's not the light.
yeah, it kind of points out, even he says, I affirmed it, I sustained it, I saw it as good, and I separated the light, so it's separated. So it's like, it is, in a sense, God's like, all right, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be that. I mean, I own it, but I'm not going to be it.
That's really cool. Darkness he called night. So you're saying he's not the light, but he is. Is that,
Well,
would that
okay,
be
so
opposite
yeah,
then?
and then that's a good point too. So I did, at some point I talked about that. So the idea is he's not dark. He's not the dark. He's not, but he's the dark. But God is the darkness. It's the place from which everything comes from. And so really, I don't know if it's right to say God is any one part of it, right? That would be silly. But the dark, it's out of the darkness where things come from, and from within the darkness, there's the voice. Really, because God's voice said, God said, let there be light. So when his voice moved upon the waters, then light came out of that. That's like a physical reaction from the friction upon the seas. But I don't know if you'd say that God's the voice, because even then the seraphim is the angel of the voice. So it could be that there's a number of evolving angels or like creations like that existed up until Lucifer. Because the beginning also, like, what is that? How long is that? Even in Genesis, it references things like Enoch, which we know Enoch is not in the Bible proper, but parts of it are. So, you could say, because it's not in the Bible, if you're somebody who's like that, you could say, okay, well, it's not fully truth, but at least, if some of it's in the Bible, parts of it are fully truth, so it's worth looking into, at least. And it's a pretty decent series of stories about the creation and the angels and the different angels that existed at the beginning. But that's why I thought Tron was so good at telling that story, because it's probably told by people who really get the inside joke like pretty strongly. I mean, like, they might be on the wrong side of things, which is why I'm trying. I don't know, like, if that's fair to say anyone's on, it's not good to judge, but it's good to say that there was a side drawn at one point, and that's like kind of the idea, is that Moses draws the line. So it's interesting that Moses is the line in South Park, because if the MCP is Moses, then we are talking about a line that's crossed. And if you're not supposed to cross that line, I mean, but all at the end of it, you have still an interesting story, because it gives you a deep look into the psyche and pathology and philosophy of sun worshippers and of Crowleyians, like, and of that time especially, but it's even of the time today, because Disney more than ever seems like they're doing this with their time. They're aiming towards the next version of this, the next incarnation of this story. And it always seems to be, in the same vein, where it's questioning the biblical narrative almost sarcastically.
Well, and I have a question about that, because there's been so much just different people saying their opinion on what should and shouldn't be in the Bible. And so you're sharing things here that there's things to be taken, literal in a sense, and pieces that were included mean that it was true. What are your thoughts then about the Bible being, I don't know, tampered with over time, and getting back to the most authentic version of the Bible that we can find? I mean, have you?
Well, so I don't know if getting back to something is ever the right answer always, because sometimes it's worth seeing where we're going. But at the same time, the originals are a collection of things, So Pope Gregory in Croatia at one point said, look, we have all these ideas. Why don't we put some down? I like these ones. And we kind of just went with that forever, And there's I think the talk I'm going to do soon, I'm going to put out probably like tomorrow, with Phil Lawler. He talks a lot about this and his theory, that the universe, that the universe is stories creating stories. Like, the most fundamental force is God's use of storytelling. So even saying "let there be light" is telling a story that comes out, and that story allows for the creation of a universal realm. It's the abracadabra. right? So
Mhm.
without there being like a certain amount of storytelling to begin with, we wouldn't exist. And we are stories. You know, you've got your whole life, your whole day is a story. So without even going too far out of what you are, it's like if you're in the image of God and your life is a series of stories, then stories are a very big part of what God is and what the creation is. You know, in the process of the creation, you know, like, and it's like a struggle, it's pathos, it's what goes up and comes down. It's like the stories, like the range of the character is based on that. So maybe it's not supposed to like be um that we worry so hard. It's like if we find something that we resonate with, then we should analyze it to its end place, you know. And if there's parts of it that we don't, then we should figure out why that is. You know, it's not. It's like I watch TV shows I don't like. You know, I think a lot of people argue that they should. I mean, you know, I don't do it all the time, but I know some people will say like, "Oh, why should I invest my energy into something?" Like, well, man, if you're that worried that it's going to influence you, then maybe it will. You know, maybe there's something really valuable to or powerful to it if it's able to do that. And you know, again, if you can watch TV shows and say, "Okay, well, they're not that great. They're just dumb shows." I mean, you know, that kind of vegetative imprinting. Shouldn't you be more concerned with that than like reading different versions of the Bible? But I do know some people that like translating the Bible, you know, because there's ways of doing it that are like you learn Greek, you learn Aramaic, you learn Russian, you know, like look at the old words and you come up with new ways of reading those words. And I believe that they're, you know, like that's kind of the Warner Brothers cartoon like approach to the Bible or to God's storytelling, which is like there are layers to it that you don't get until you get older. And by the time you get to be really old, you're like, wow, no kid would ever get that. That was a really dark thing that they did in that cartoon, but no kid's ever going to get that. So it's only for those who reach 55 or something. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I think that there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that's worth, you know, going through and like questioning if it's like completely if you're asking if it's metaphorical. But you know, if you can start by assuming everything's metaphor, and then it's just like when it gets intense is where you realize a lot of it's not. A lot of it's much more than metaphor.
Mhm.
A lot more of it's real, you know, than anything else. And that I think that's what kind of bothers people the most. Isn't like, you know, what if it's not true?
Mhm.
It's so they're more concerned with the plausibility of it being true, you know.
And that's, yeah, I think that'll be an interesting conversation that we have too, just the truth in the Bible and maybe some more of the actual events or things that took place. Because I have a different take on some of the concepts of the wrath of God, and the way that that's being. Oh, that was me.
Sorry.
And the way that the wrath of God is being used to instill a lot of fear. And I have I don't want to talk about it right now, first, but in the future, maybe we can talk about that. I had another question about the sun then. And the sun is God, sun God. Um, that's misguided, in your opinion? Or is that, again, to take away from what God really is? Or do you
Yeah,
have
I
an opinion on
mean, I tend to think that the idea of God as the sun is to take away from the real God. I mean, like they spend so much time worshiping the sun and calling God light in public that it just seems like suspicious.
that?
And also reading their own books, it seems pretty obvious that they're interested um, in light more than they're interested in darkness. Like they make it seem like, oh, like the Hollywood rendition of things, the bad guys are interested in darkness, but the
Mm-hmm.
evil guys, you know, the more powerful guys, the good guys or whatever, and the good, you know, the ones who are trying to do what's best and they're destroying other people's lives and everything else. A lot of times they're wearing all white, you know. And I'm seeing that more and more. It's like this
Mm-hmm.
accidental where you can tell that they're wrong about their own story and they're trying super hard to present a story where people are altruistically better than God. Like that's a good tip. That their idea is that they've created something newer than God. You know, and also sun worship seems to be connected with this idea of data and stars, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they think that any one of these light sources can send them information or data. You can channel it star channeling is one of the oldest Chaldean practices of divination. So you like focus on a particular star and get energy from it, or get information from it, or like whatever. Like that's your connection to these realms, you know, it's through the stars. So if it wasn't the light, then it would be the darkness. And who uses the darkness? Well, like in South America, the people that were the most native, like that were the most peaceful, you know, and the least warrior based like parts of South America, like the Guarani, for instance, they measured the space between the light, like those like realms of darkness. They would say like this is the, you know, the area of darkness between, you know, these 4 stars or whatever. Those, you know, that's a fox. And so it's not so much like the stars connected together. It's like the emptiness in between them. It's like an inverted series of constellations, but they're not constellations because of the absence of constellations. So, I mean, I tend to think those people are some of the most devout, like pure people I've met. Like, honestly, like there's some, like they're very careful about not hurting others, you know, even living in a place filled with like predatorial insects, you know, like they're still trying. And like when the Hindus came there, or the early Jesuits, like they were astounded by how spiritual they already were. They weren't confused about spirituality or doing what was right. That's why they were interested in talking with them in the first place, you know? So it seems like, yeah, the sun worship thing is associated with masochism and sadomasochism. A lot of the cults that are into sun worship like to hurt, like to kill babies, to, you know, get the blood over the soil because the sun's growing their food. So they have to sacrifice some blood, you know, to the earth for the sun to like collect it. And there seems like there's a lot more blood rituals that are associated with the sun worship.
Because it does provide life, but it's not necessarily God. It's part of the, I guess, the system, the entirety of it.
Yeah, like if God makes light without the sun, right? Like, because apparently light came before the sun, and then it was separated. So at some point, it was just light came out of the movement of the voice across from the water. There was a movement of sound, and those waves friction with light. So there didn't need to be suns. Yeah, bioluminescence or geoluminescence or some kind of luminescence, sonic luminescence.
No light.
Yeah.
And that happens when you just touch the water and these things light up and there's no light. Same with reaching the bottom, you know, the ocean floor. It's not the sun that's necessarily responsible for life down there. There's other things. So,
and a lot of people like to grow plants. You know, they'll tell you like that you can get a lot of capacity from bulbs of light. You know, but isn't that a lot what the sun does? Because it's like, look, use this bulb, and you'll get these specific nutrients, and you won't even need to know that the other nutrients aren't in it. And you take a plant in the sun, and it's much happier than a plant that's under a light bulb. But I'm sure that if it was under like the breath of God, it'd be even more stoked. Like that seems like the logic.
Well, LRH has some interesting lighting studies with plants and sunlight versus white light and red, just different colors of light and the growth factors. I'll have to look into that now that you brought that up. But I think sunlight was one, and then just the white light was even like more flourishing than the sunlight, and I was confused by that because I would have assumed the sunlight would have been the most, I guess, the most habitable for plants or the best growing.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely not the case from even just like studies we've done on plants using LEDs. Like because NASA was of course doing plant studies using LEDs. I knew a kid and I was helping do some of these studies, power density, a couple years ago, and we found that sugar increased when you use a certain wavelength of light that wasn't available because it was being blocked out by other wavelengths of light. So you would just use this like range of light between like the 200 and 325th nanospectrum, nanometer power spectrum. So it would just hit this purple-esque kind of light that you barely see, but then it would produce all the sugar. But then the plant wouldn't have enough of the other kind of light that would make it stronger, so it would grow like a vine, you know? It'd be useful for space, supposedly. That was what they were saying, because it'd make it grow hemp in space. I mean, you know, come on, like they're doing that for some reason.
That's interesting because now you're saying, you know, if you're worshiping sun, whatever light, then we have other artificial lights that you could create. And then
Yeah.
what would those be? Are those to be worshipped?
Well,
They're
I mean, you
artificial.
know, those are
I'm just
crystals. Those are interesting. Those are crystals that are connected to luminescence that they made LEDs from, right? Those light emitting diodes, and now they have organic light emitting diodes. So what is that other than
ooh,
something that's kind
organic.
of alive? Yeah, it's organic, inorganic chemistry versus organic chemistry. So you've got some kind of living, it's almost bioluminescence at that point. OLEDs have some kind of absorption of darkness. That's one of the most important things about them. So the thing about them also is, where do LEDs come from? Like, who invented LEDs? Well, who amongst us remembers? But the story is that they found them in the mountain, you know, that they were working on the V rockets. So the German Nazis supposedly had, you know, tons of LEDs, like, and that's how far back they go, at least, you know.
Interesting. And now LEDs are supposedly not, they're more economical, but not as good for the human. I don't even know. There's so many
Well,
different studies.
I'm sure that you can make LEDs that are great for the human in a certain way, but they don't think I don't think they do that. I don't think they do that on purpose. Now, there are lights you can get that are okay for the humans, but they're different, right? So, like, for instance, you have what kind of light? You want light for growth, you know, because that's the spectrum that's missing. So you put that back in, and you have red light everywhere. Do you want to live under red light all the time? It's gonna be bad for your eyes. So you're getting parts of the light. You're not getting all of the light. You know, you're not
What are
getting
the best
all of it.
lights for my house so my kids are safe? That's, I guess, what we're
Oh
trying to
well, I
research that.
mean,
There's a
if
lot.
there are ways of getting LEDs that'll be fine. If you get the RGB strip lights, those rainbow strip lights, they change different colors. Like, it's a rope it's like a strip of rope that sticks to a building. It has, I think it's the RGB 325 or 3535. I'll send you a link to it on Amazon. But they're RGB lights that change colors fast, and they're like a rope of them that's flat. It looks like a piece of tape, and they come on film reels. And I have those, you know, I have them back home, and like those are pretty useful, like, because they'll have full spectrum, but they'll do different things. Like, if you turn them on really fast, strobing color, it'll wake you up really fast. You know what I mean? It can keep you up for days. And if you keep it on a slower thing, you know, pulsing slower, going through the rainbow, like, you can get just enough. It's like going through days really fast. So you're getting different. So it depends on what you want. Like, you might need a couple different kinds of lights. Ideally, if you have tons of money, you know, like Hollywood lamps are the best, you know, like not LED ones, but the old RE style tungsten bulbs. Because I'm pretty sure if you were a vampire, you'd want to use those to keep suntanned. Like, those ones have pretty much daytime 3200 Kelvin.
So the old tungsten bulbs are good to go.
Oh, they're awesome, man. I mean, they're pretty great.
Okay.
But that's the thing. That's only if you need it. And a lot of the time, you probably want your kids to sleep during the evening and not have, you know, like, because I've had those bulbs, and all you end up doing is, for a while there, I had a projector and some tungsten bulbs and these LED bulbs, and, like, you know, you don't want to be awake during the day because it's too bright to watch a projector. Or maybe it starts out that you want to stay up a little later to watch a movie at night. But then the light's so bright, it's like more bright in your house and nicer than it is outside underneath the you know, the
Sun.
trails of things, the luminescence of, well, you know, I mean, how often are you even under it? Because you're in between some stuff.
True.
So it depends. Like, if you can have a good time outside, then you might want to be careful with having the best bulbs in your house.
Yeah, true. I want the safest, and whatever that means, because you can.
Well, you
read
have
any-
winter, so it makes sense to have tungsten bulbs during the winter.
We might want to be invested in a lot of tungsten bulbs.
You can get them pretty cheap. I'll show you where you can get, like, because, you know, you don't need to have the Hollywood frames. You can get work lamps, you know, at Home Depot, and you can put tungsten bulbs in them. You get those on Amazon or eBay or something pretty cheap. You wear gloves because they get hot. You don't want them to touch anything. That's, you know, so don't overdo it.
What about the old UV, like, sun lamps?
Yeah, I mean, I hear you can get cancer from everything. Who knows if that's one of the things. I've heard some stories that one's got some issues. Like it's pretty rad because, like I said, like you can have the LED bulbs that give you certain kinds of frequencies at a time. But if you have a weird color, it's gonna mess with your eyes, you know, and eventually you sort of get used to it. So if you're living under like a purple lamp all the time, it's cool, but it does something to you. It makes it uncomfortable to be outside of it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Cool. Well, thank you for that tidbit of information. All right.
Do you want to do some stuff on volcanoes? I think that was what we really got here for originally. My bad.
No, Mike and I were just chatting. I think Nathan has a bunch of stuff to present on volcanoes. I have a ton of stuff regarding earthquakes and volcanoes and the interrelatedness of that. But I don't know that I want to, talk more about that until Nathan's got his pieces in place. He's got a lot of the early work, I think, that kind of explains why volcanoes are important now and why we're talking about them now more than before. So I don't know. I mean, I could obviously talk about volcanoes for like years, but I think we need Nathan. So Mike, is Mike still here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi.
I'm just showing a video on daylight.
Oh, I thought that was your property. I was like, what? Let me just pull out my electro tube.
Funny.
No,
is Nathan still with his trailer, or does he want to talk about anything, or is?
I think he is. I think he's taking the day to do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we can do that tomorrow.
We could keep this shorter, and then I think that'd be good. So, yeah. It's already like done. Is that how you want to close the video?
I don't know. I haven't closed the video. I wanted to show this.
Oh,
I think this guy did great work. He basically goes about and shows he offers the solution to Andreas's blue question.
Using electromagnetism and cathode tubes and a Tesla coil. That's the only way to answer my questions. I appreciate him.
Wow.
No, earlier in the video, he already said,
look at that. That's photons. Oh, sky looks blue because. What did that say? The sky looks blue because blue photons. What?
I'll give you guys a link so you can just watch it in high quality. All right.
Okay.
I can't help it. My system is only 720 pixels.
Well, this is pretty rad.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So we could use magnets to veer the particles.
Mr. Dan Dimension here.
But it's supposed to be empty, right? Like this is supposed to be an empty vacuum tube. So it's not supposed to have particles in it. Okay.
That was so cool, Mike.
There must be some particles. There's probably just a few in there.
There you go. I gave him a sub.
That's the way to do it, guys. One more at a time.
Who is this guy? Let there be light.
Dan Dimension.
Super, super cool. I will subscribe.
Yeah, it's a star forward.
Oh. Bye, Andreas.
Oh, he literally just popped off.
That was so cool. Dude, I need to know why the sky's blue. Like, that's one of my big questions, because we're told a lot of different things.
Oh,
and
that video perfectly explains it.
I know.
We lost Andreas. No goodbye, nothing.
Maybe he wanted to go watch that video because it was so good, Mike. I think that's maybe what happened.
So you may have him reappear in 5 minutes.
Beginning of the Tron discussion. I think, though, keeping these a little bit shorter would be good. I mean, just if possible. If there's only one or two people, there's probably less.
If it's only one or two people, you could just like make it an hour or so.
Yeah.
But usually when you start talking with 2 or 3 people, it ends up in 2.5 hours, and I don't think people really mind.
So I don't know. It depends on the conversation too, and who's in it. I mean,
Well, yeah, sure.
people don't want to listen to me talk about volcanoes for 3 hours, but I could easily do that, and that's just not doesn't entertain people
Hey,
as much as it entertains me.
it works on Andreas' channel, so why not?
I don't know. I don't think so. But breaking it down is good, and I think that's what we want to do. If Nathan, if we can get a chance to talk, even just talking like this is so much better than text because we can go back and forth without having to take an hour to write. But I think we should do some 20, 30-minute shorts where we're doing like volcano proofs, and we can, take it to each thing that we've been looking into. So like the whole climate change and the whole earthquakes, and we could even do just one feature on cataclysm or mud flood and just show the dates of the super eruptions, and that might be more interesting. And I don't know if Nathan can get like artsy with it or if we just want to do a straight presentation, but
Straight presentation. Who cares?
okay.
Andreas can stick quacks on it if he wants.
Okay. And then I'll talk to Nathan because we can even get up like tonight or tomorrow and just start doing some 20-minute shorts that could be aired.
Yeah, that Nathan suggested that too earlier.
Yeah, I think that's probably our.
I'll sleep, and when I wake up, I can talk to you guys again.
Perfect. Is it at bedtime there?
No,
Oh,
no,
not
I
yet.
sleep. I sleep about 6 hours a night.
Okay. And it's my 3:30 in the afternoon, and you're evening, aren't you? Because you're morning whenever.
22, 28.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for letting me sit in on that. That was interesting. I was just talking about that. I'm like, how's Andreas going to explain God is darkness?
Oh, there you go.
And he did. It wasn't like God. It was interesting. Cool. Can't
All
wait
right.
to watch the thing. Thank you, Mike. We'll talk later.
Yes, catch you later.
Okay,
Cheers.
bye. Cheers.